they give him the benefit of intellect that he does not possess at all.
It's called the headline writers of the New York Times.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
yeah.
It is. It's remarkable.
My name is Brittlestar, not really.
And I'm Sandy Garasino, really.
And this is Canada Watching U.S. News. Well, hi there. Thank you for watching and or listening to Canada Watching U.S. News. As you heard, my name is Brittlestar, not really. And I'm joined with the amazing Sandy Garasino. And our guest this week, I'm going to say even more amazing, if that doesn't insult Sandy.
It's more amazing.
More amazing.
I've been compared to Sandy all my life. I'm used to it.
Yeah, exactly. Equally amazing, Jon Cryer.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, John. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah.
So happy to be here. All the way from the shores of America.
Deep behind enemy lines.
Deep behind enemy lines.
The basements of America.
Exactly. It's more of a bunker, I think, at this point, isn't it?
Yeah. In case the shit goes down, Stuart. The shit could go down. We got like 2 weeks, and then you're gonna be knocking on the door of my bunker.
Exactly.
I'm gonna say, sorry, man.
That's what one of the few things a lot of doomsday preppers forget to put in their kits, their survival kits, is the podcast list to listen to. That's the thing. Which podcast will save me in the event of doomsday?
Gonna have some time to kill.
Exactly. We're going to be talking today about who could possibly be undecided as an undecided voter between Trump and Harris, and that's a whole thing. But I just want to briefly touch on some other stuff first, and this is why we have you on, John, because you're an educated American, you're smart, you're insightful, you're engaged, you look good in a hat.
Thanks.
Which is helpful on a podcast.
It is. Well, for those subscribers who have the video, I mean, that this is really paying off for them. That's it. But if you just have the audio, you have to imagine it.
This is the added value, people.
Exactly. Yeah. But Elon Musk is currently giving $1 million away each day to registered voters in battleground states for Donald Trump. The sweepstakes are open to registered voters in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. And the goal, of course, is to support a petition affirming the First and Second Amendments and to boost registration among Trump voters. My question, I have 2 questions, and feel free, anyone, to answer these questions if you can. Is this legal? And the other question is, does it matter?
I like that you read them with the same read as well. Is this legal? Does it matter?
Yeah.
My understanding is it is illegal, and it would make sense to not be legal because there's unbounded possibilities for misuse of such a thing. If you're enticing people to register to vote by giving cash. Even if it's an opportunity at a cash prize, even if you have the best of intentions, which I'm sure Elon Musk has. Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But even if you have the best of intentions, that the misuse and abuse of something like that is obvious. So my understanding is it is in fact illegal. Whether it matters is Donald Trump has cultivated a following for whom illegality only matters if you're an undocumented immigrant. You can break every other law you feel like breaking if you're handing them power in the White House.
Well, this is one of the things that's been like a recurring theme on this podcast is that we often ask questions like it was sort of incredulous tones, like what is this? How can this possibly be legal? How can this possibly happen? And it's always followed up with, but will it even matter? Which is the most amazing thing to me is the fact that exactly as you said, unless you're an undocumented immigrant, it doesn't really seem to matter what he does. Like it really is a case of Trump saying way back in 2016, I could stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and it wouldn't matter. And everyone went, that's really funny. And then it turns out he was serious, which is terrifying. Like, because there's no accountability.
Yeah, he very rarely jokes, actually. Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy. Go ahead.
No, I just want to make one kind of observation about the question of legality as a former prosecutor and former practicing lawyer. So many things, like you think it's so obviously illegal, like surely this is criminal. And then when you get into it, like obviously some people have the resources to have lawyered things sufficiently. Like there'll always be some kind of weird little sketchy thing. Oh well, if we had ever thought that someone might pull a stunt like this, we would have tightened the legislation around vote buying. But maybe paying, having $1 million lottery to for people who get somebody to sign a petition is not actually technically vote buying or paying for registration. So, I mean, there's going to be lots of like little weird things like this. But also, an awful lot of people, I think, at this stage are playing the longer game that if Trump is elected, pardons might be out there for anybody who helped, which raises, I mean, that gets back to, Stuart, what you're saying is like, how can this be, how can such blatant like trading of favors for pardons be legal? But I mean, it looks like the court is not going to be terribly concerned about it. A pardon would be an official act by a sitting president.
Well, interestingly, though, presidents do have a certain limitation on the pardon, in that they can only pardon for federal crimes. So if like Pennsylvania was to, if they have a statute against it, then they could press a case. And I don't know, they may well. Again, I don't know that the justice system in the United States is capable of acting fast enough for these things to make a difference. I mean, what Trump has been.
Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, he's been amazing at delaying things, and that's something he's done for decades. Because every time you delay things, it causes the other side to have to expend more resources, and eventually you just outlast the people. They like when he was sued by the Justice Department for housing discrimination. You take a long time, you slow them down, you negotiate, and eventually they're tired out and they just want to give you a settlement. It's something because he's been a very wealthy guy his whole life. That has been reality for him. Just facing legal consequences quickly just does not happen to him. And it's scary because other people have learned that that's the case. He's demonstrated all of the weaknesses of the American judicial system.
Yeah, I mean, there's three things that sort of struck me about this, and just watching Trump in general, and how he operates and how he's commanded himself in the political world. One is that in 2016, I remember being shocked. It's like, wow, all this stuff, this checks and balances were just gentlemen's agreements. These were all just kind of like handshakes and let's just be good. Okay, boys. Which just, I mean, a guy like him, who's like, that's not the law. Well, then I'm not going to worry about it. The second part is that,
and by the way, even if it was the law, very often he didn't worry about it. But
he didn't worry about it. Exactly. And the second part, exactly to that point, is that, and I don't know how, I've often wondered, like, how far can you go down in crime for this to still work? Because his whole thing is just to do as many things as possible and to overwhelm, as it were, the system so they can't react fast enough. It's like, I've done this wrong, and now I'm doing this wrong. Now I'm doing this wrong. Now I'm doing this wrong. So when you end up going back, even the 34 counts against him, you have to remind people, what's that for again?
Because it happened so long ago.
It happened so long ago. And as I say, I don't know how far you can get away with that kind of stuff, because you do teach other people how to do that. But that accountability where it's like, can you just, if I want to rob a bunch of stores, if I rob enough of them, do I get away with it? It's distressing. And that lack of accountability is I think to me is the number one reason for concern for Trump getting back into the Oval Office, is that he doesn't have any accountability. He's never said, listen, I messed up, I'm going to make it better. Those words have never left his mouth. I can almost guarantee.
And unfortunately, the Supreme Court in their immunity ruling gave him carte blanche to do anything he wants to, as long as it's as he can couch it in an official act, like, say, sicking the Justice Department on a political rival. It's very frustrating because the court basically they made it so that so we couldn't currently prosecute him for acts, but in the future, they can do this all they want. So it was they really threaded a remarkable needle on that Supreme Court ruling, and it's deeply. I've commented about this. The Roberts Court, I think, will be regarded as deeply unethical and corrupt, and one of the worst. I mean, Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott. I mean, I think all of those will absolutely be thought of as a piece of with the worst directions that the Supreme Court has gone down.
And John, isn't it interesting? Because what's fascinating to me about that is I think that this is exactly the opposite of what John Roberts thought his leadership of the court was going to achieve, when he came in, and he was so respected, more so than, most of the other Republican nominees for the bench. And it's just, it's astounding that this person has really caved. And I'm mystified by the mechanisms of that caving. Do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I mean, it's all, the court has, once Donald Trump appointed 3 more justices that are all sort of young Turks that are all, they all have this history within the right-wing movement of, Brett Kavanaugh worked on the 2000 election, where that was where they stopped
the Al Gore
recount.
Election, the Florida Chad election.
Yes, exactly. Back in 2000, the Republicans sued and had a mini fake riot to stop a recount. Whereas now they're all about, we need a recount, we need an audit, we need another recount. If you recall, in 2016, Jill Stein raised money to do a recount of Pennsylvania. She raised enough money, and then Republican lawyers stopped the recount, which, in other words, they're fine with, if they've won, they don't care about election integrity. None of that means anything to them. But in terms of John Roberts, I don't know enough about his personal narrative. I know that when he was brought in, and when he saved Obamacare to some degree in terms of judicial mechanisms. But that Obergefell happened, which is gay marriage under John Roberts. A lot of people considered him really a moderating force. But now that there's these 3 young whippersnappers on the court, that's actually a very kind word for them. It seems like he's, I mean, I don't know if it's just like he's among the crazies and he drank the Kool-Aid. I don't know, but that immunity decision was one of the most. He kept trying to minimize the importance of it and said, no, we've been super careful about this, but it's terrible. It's just terrible. It's as terrible as everybody was saying. I don't get. I can only think that his environment has caused him to not understand what is happening in the world. That's the only thing I can think of.
This is a quick aside. Was there ever a time I was thinking to myself this morning? I'm so involved and invested in the political sphere currently, both in Canada and in the U.S., because Canada's not free of goons.
No, you've got some wild stuff going on now, and a lot of it is our fault. I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
And again, as always, I do apologize for Ted Cruz. He was born in Alberta, so
yeah. So there's that.
Okay, we're fine. We're even. But I was thinking to myself this morning, is there ever going to be a time where I don't have to care as much about politics again? And I don't know if that's just a position of privilege or if it's just a case of maybe I was less mature. 6 years ago, which is entirely possible. But have you ever thought to yourself, now because you're very involved in politics, you're very, very up on everything that's happening. You're invested as well. Do you ever think to yourself, God, I just want this to stop?
Oh yes, all the time. I mean, I just want to entertain people. I love working and being a clown and being ridiculous and doing sitcoms in front of people. I love that. I all those people saying stick to acting. I'm like, I would love to.
Please,
love to. You're talking my language. The rise of Trump, and I had never really been political before that, but the rise of Trump in 2015, I had to start talking about it on talk shows and I get it. As a person who enjoys entertainment, I don't love to know all the political ideas of all the actors involved. I don't need to know that. I just want to enjoy the thing. I get it. Why people don't, why people get annoyed at people who are in the public eye, talking to them about that kind of stuff. I get it. And I would love to not care. I do think that Trumpism is something I've observed historically in other places. And by the way, America's not, we've had cults of personality before. It's not, it's not wildly unusual. It's just in the modern era, we haven't had one that has been so perverse and bizarre and awful. And that now seems to have just a shocking amount of support. At any rate, but this is how it happens, But the point I was going to make was that does go to your topic today, which is undecided voters. I think a lot of undecided voters just are repelled by how polarizing and crazy it's gotten. But I'm sorry, Sandy, it looked like you were about to.
Well, I'm actually and we should get back to our subject. But Jon, I'm actually interested in your perspective, given how much of Trump's rise, and I haven't seen The Apprentice, the movie that is released, and apparently everybody is saying great things about. But as someone who is deeply involved in the media business and understands entertainment, understands the whole television culture, I'm wondering if as you reflect on the rise of Trump and how this has all happened and how it is that such large segments of the American public seems to be just completely kind of overwhelmed by the media environment, the television, the image that Trump created. Just what are your observations from sort of inside the beast and knowing how it works and knowing its influence on public opinion?
Well, I've met Mark Burnett. I enjoyed The Apprentice as a television show.
Me too.
It was a really, really well made television show. It was fun. It was a business contest. That works. And they did a great job with it. But in it, in the process of doing that, they engaged in myth making. They had, apparently Trump's offices were so shabby that they couldn't use them. They had to build other offices on Trump Tower. That conference room that he used to fire people in was a set. They had to. Recently, one of the producers of the show came forward to apologize for having built that myth. Another producer named Bill Pruitt came forward because his NDA he only worked on the first 2 seasons. He came forward to say that in his presence, he saw Donald Trump describing Kwame Jackson, who was one of the finalists in the first season of The Apprentice, using the N-word and saying that he would not let him win because he didn't think America could accept a African American, but he didn't use that word, as the winner. That when this came out, I really thought, oh, this is going to be a big deal. But it's fascinating because I think Americans don't want to know that what's behind the curtain on some level. I think Americans on some level don't want to realize that whole image was just built and it was never true. The Art of the Deal was written by somebody else, a guy named Tony Schwartz. He didn't his company was never particularly successful. He inherited a $400 million company from his father, who also lent him, I think, $15 million in various increments during his early years. You know, it was interesting. I talked to a couple of NBC executives, and they were baffled at who this guy was. He said, he was harmless. We met him. He was a clown. He was just, he was a fun guy to have on camera. And he was totally harmless. He had to be talked through all the shows. He didn't, he never sort of understood what was going on. And that image has been incredibly powerful. I mean, I've had people in my family who are Trump supporters, and at one point I said, that's all a con, right? He was not a particularly successful businessman, and they were shocked.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know me, you understand show business too, because you are part of my family, I was really surprised that they really thought that he was this wildly successful businessman.
So do you think that because this is now kind of taken as an article of faith, which is that the NBC show made him, although he does seem like, it's funny about the whole offices thing and how dowdy they apparently were. But I mean, his apartment has for decades and long before the Apprentice, he really bought into the oligarchy design style for his
the oligarchy collection.
Yes, I mean, it's a big coffee table book. Oligarchy. Oh,
to me, it's a really big sign that no matter how many times that guy got married, none of his wives got to redecorate his apartment. Like that tells you something. You're That's right. A very bad sign. Very bad sign. When you're, can we just get more gold leaf over here? But anyway. Because he has really understood. I'm kind of interested in people saying, well, we created Donald Trump, because it seems like he has understood the significance of projecting that image that 1,000%. Was amplified by the Apprentice, like almost from the womb. So did the Apprentice really do this much, or do you think this is just something about the power of the man himself?
No, I do think it was the Apprentice that really that gave him the sense of competence that people do imbue him with now, because he is incredibly inept, and he shows that every day. I mean, every day in the last week, his campaign has had a fiasco. Every day. Something has gone horribly wrong. But he's still, people still think of him as a guy with some capabilities, mostly because they keep thinking that his supporters will always support him, and maybe they won't. We'll find out. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. I don't know. I mean, it'll run out of steam at some point. All cults of personality eventually do. But I don't know how long that'll take. But I definitely think that it was the Apprentice. But for 40 years, because I grew up in New York City, so I was always seeing him in the headlines, but there was always a sort of lovable huckster thing about him.
Yeah, sure.
And, it's like, he's a hustler. Yeah, he keeps going bankrupt, but he keeps at it, and he's, he's got that ridiculous hair, and he's, he again, people perceived him as harmless, basically. There was an interview with him years ago where he said that the only people he wanted doing his accounting were people with yarmulkes, and that black people weren't smart enough to do it. And, and he later admitted, for all intents and purposes, that he said that, and again, in New York City, that's just kind of accepted as that's the reality. We're all here.
Everybody gets to live in New York City.
Yes.
They take very accepting of everybody.
Yes, exactly. No, the idea is it's this stew of racism, and that's how we are. That's who we are. We're all racist. Yeah. But it's interesting because people still defend him tooth and nail. He's not a racist. He had Omarosa in the White House. It's like, well, it takes a little more than that.
But, you're right. Exactly. I think I sort of thinking back to the
Diamond
Apprentice.
and Silk.
And he was exactly. Yeah.
Both Diamond and Silk.
Are they both one of them dead, or one of them's dead? Or
One
both
of them has passed on.
One of them has passed away. You're right. I agree with you in the Apprentice thing, where he was a clown. He was a character. He was like a Scrooge McDuck come to life.
Yes.
The one thing I think he's, especially with the OJs too, and the money, and all that kind of stuff in the intro, it was like, oh, this guy's got everything. He's got planes. He's got gold. He's got a plane, and there's the plane.
He had a helicopter. He was in slow motion coming off the helicopter.
That's right, exactly.
He got the slow-mo off the helicopter.
Money.
Yes.
And you kind of bought into it. But the one thing I will give him credit for is that, as someone who creates stuff, every now and then, and I've talked to other people who create stuff, music, art, films, books, whatever. And they always, when you get angry that something's not successful, you worked really hard on, you look at something that is successful and you're like, God, it's so stupid. If I could just do something stupid, maybe that would make me tons of money. And I think one of the things that he really understands really, really well is that he knows how to do that. Like, I think, I've often said to Shannon, I wish I could just dumb down what I'm doing and I'd probably be 10 times wealthier and blah, blah, blah. And Shannon's like, you would go insane if you did that. And I think he has the ability to say ridiculous strings of non sequiturs, of nonsense, of garbage and gobbledygook and the wrong thing all the time, and have both feet in his mouth at the same time, and then still be like, you know what? It doesn't matter. As long as I show up, as long as I look the way I look, as long as I project that image, I could say anything I want. And that is his superpower, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. And he has a remarkable grasp of his public narrative, and I admire people who are like that, that they have created this public narrative of their life, and they get what the audience wants to see from them, and they reinforce it. Charlie Sheen, my former partner on 2.5, he also gets that. He understands the drama, that the psychodrama that he's trying to create, and that his audience. I mean, I remember when he went crazy on the show, he was great at he was getting arrested right and left. He was, he was not showing up. He was, and he managed to get people on and he was the highest paid actor ever on television, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And it would make over $1 million per episode, like $1.2 million an episode, and we do 22 of those every year. And all he has to do is show up and have some fun, but he couldn't, he wouldn't show up. He would get arrested. He was in rehab. He would, and then when he got fired, he got the audience was on his side. I was like, this is astonishing. He managed to turn the narrative to he was being victimized,
Yeah. I wouldn't vote for him for president either. Just to let you know.
No, although he'd be a better one. Then Trump.
There's the clip right there.
Yes. I've said that. I've said that for years.
Yeah.
He's not actively malign. He doesn't hate immigrants. I have to say, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to get serious for a moment.
Sure.
The scariest moment of the Republican National Convention in the United States was when they were holding up and waving happily with this huge smile, "Mass deportation now" signs.
Yeah.
These are people who have no understanding of what a mass deportation actually entails.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying. If he were to do the 11 million to 20 million people he's saying, that would require a modern American Gestapo. That would require absolutely internment camps. It would require breaking up families. It would require wholesale mass arrests.
Stormtrooper methods. You're going into businesses and asking for records of every employee. Yeah,
exactly. And he is, and there's people waving their placards, smiling, yay, mass deportation.
Get all those other people out.
Exactly. It won't happen to me. It'll be those other people.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was chilling, and I'm sad that has not been the focus of the last month, that people have not been saying, do you understand what that would do to the United States, to any place?
Yeah. And I don't think they do at all.
It's interesting. Well, but I think they kind of do, but they just want to. So just before we started recording, we were talking about my little stint at LAX, where I did something that I never do, which is I went to go sit at the bar by myself to watch the Dodgers and Mets game, and because I wanted to watch the Dodgers and Mets game because I had hours to kill, and this seemed like a good thing. So I go and I sit up at the bar, and right next to me is a man and a woman, and they've just met at the bar, and
I love that.
He starts in on starting to compliment her, and just like, and he's just starting to, and this is an ordinary person we're talking about here, an ordinary middle-aged woman at a bar, probably watching the Dodgers game, and it's not me. I just want to underscore this point. So
this woman you're talking about.
So he starts just like talking about, and it's not even like X-ray vision. It's just the kind of thing that every woman wants somebody to notice them and to see them. And I really understand you. And, that dress you're wearing, like you've got a really great sense of color. And, there's something really special about you. You're different. And I'm listening to this. And I'm just, please, Dodgers, please end this game really soon. And I listened as these two people, and he started to order more and more drinks, and it was all about, we're going to get the high-end whiskey, and let's get the high-end this. And he's starting to talk about how, he makes $600,000 a year, and he owns this, and he owns this, and he owns this. And like and she, she was just getting a little bit more lightheaded, and she was going with it. And because this guy who had this money, and he could really see into her, and he could see her life, and he understood her problems. Like he could learn this. He knew this after 10 minutes in a bar. And I kid you not, within half an hour, they are necking, and then they're going to go try and find a place. And
my God.
I kid you not. And he had her, and all I could think of was, this is what Trump is doing to America. Is like telling all of these guys, I understand you, and I'm rich. I'm a big guy, and I'm a manly guy, and I have like my boats and my planes and my automobiles, and I have all of these things, but I can see there's something special about you that I bet nobody has really ever noticed or understood about you before. And she was so, and have some more high-end whiskey, not regular, like high-end drinks. Just give us the best. You're in a bar at LAX, like give us give us your best bartender. Thanks, bro. And it was just like, this is it. This is how it's happened. This is exactly.
And from the outside, you're seeing nothing but red flags, right? You're just looking at it going, like, how?
Yeah.
How is this
Girl,
happening?
you know better than this. You know better than this. You've been down this road before. You are about to get in so anyway, that's my story.
Well, that was distressing. It was a great story, though.
That was a very apt metaphor, and I hope she's okay.
Me too.
I hope she's not at the airport Hilton,
exactly waking up right now without a kidney.
She's without a kidney. Yeah.
She's got.
I don't know.
So that kind of brings us to the topic of the show, which is, how could there possibly be undecided voters between Trump and Harris? And because it's still neck and neck largely, and which is it just makes me ask, like, why, dear God, why is it neck and neck? It doesn't make any sense at all. And I've been wondering, like, how do people become undecided voters in this type of environment, in this type of high contrast election? Not in high contrast in a sense of, well, that person's tax policy seems to be better than that person's tax policy. This is just like plain old human rights, and just evidently, it's like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer and Bart are in the raft, and there's two paths to go down, and one down is like this sort of dying trees and horribleness. The other side's all sunshine and light. And as Jim Gaffigan said at the Al Smith dinner, you don't hear or read a quote and wonder if it was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump who said it. You know who said the quote. It's pretty evident. So, but it's fascinating because apparently there are 9% of the 150 million voters in the U.S. 13.5 million are undecided voters. Well, who are these people?
Well, like I said, I think they're people who do not want to participate in something so acrimonious.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Trumpism is very angry and very and all about dominance and a lot of really ugly things. And so in order to fight back, the other side has had to become dominant and at least try to be dominant and occasionally very ugly and and it looks like a brawl that you could just sort of stand aside and have your high-end whiskey and say, what, I'll figure it out later. Also, it's tough because what's been fascinating to me are Trump supporters who cloak themselves in intellectualism. That is fascinating to me. Who come up with all kinds of very very intellectual ways to forgive his behavior, or my favorite is when they give him the benefit of intellect that he does not possess at all.
It's
Because
called the headline writers of the New York Times.
Yes,
well,
it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's remarkable. It is remarkable because his mind just flits around and he says whatever stupid thing comes across his mind or whatever he saw on Fox or now he's watching OWN or Newsmax, but whatever stupid idea crosses his mind, he's suddenly sure of. Here's a good one, and it led to a lot of trouble later. There was a segment on Fox News after the 2016 election about a study done by Old Dominion University that purported to find that undocumented people were voting at incredibly high levels. What? And if you extrapolate that, it meant that 3 million people voted illegally. Well, that's what Fox said. It was one segment. The thing was utterly debunked. Like the next day, turns out it was an opt-in survey, and they had the way they had phrased a question caused a lot of people to misunderstand it. And they reran the test years later, and the same survey, and it was microscopic, the number of people who did that. But Trump then decided after that meant that 3 million was actually the difference between him and Hillary Clinton,
right?
And that meant that he actually won the popular vote because he assumes that somehow these undocumented people who were willing to answer this survey also were 100% Trump voters. Apparently, every single one of them was a Trump voter. And so he has used that talking point for years. He's like, no, I really won that, because it was somebody told him what he wanted to hear, and it will never be dislodged. And that is what he and no amount of telling him it's been debunked, it's wrong, it's untrue. He's been told that many times, but he has that incredible. He has that shameless repetition, and he just keeps repeating it.
He's so good at it.
He's good at it.
He's amazingly good at it.
He means it when he says it.
Yeah.
Do you think, John? Do you think that? One of the things that commentators in the media and we always talk about is the undecided voter, but a huge number of Americans, and actually same with Canadians, don't vote at all. So it's not that they're undecided; it's that they just don't come out. And I keep trying to comfort myself. I go to sleep at night with the pacifier that the Trump voters are not as motivated as the Harris voters, but I worry that's just a panacea. But what's your view of this about the undecided versus in a way you've kind of talked about it, the people that just want to check out. It's just like, this is too, there's fights at Thanksgiving, there's fights in the family, people aren't talking to each other. I just don't want to be part of any of this anymore. Is that the undecided, or is that the people who are just backing off? And do you think that this election is going to see more people coming out or more people staying away?
I feel like more people will come out. I do believe. My belief still is, and but who knows? Because you everybody has their own information sources, and information sources are so balkanized now that it is hard to have a real grasp of things. But I still do believe that Kamala Harris is actually motivating people better. She has a much more energetic, forward-looking agenda, and just the energy in her campaign is much different than his. He's just sort of meandering, and he's going to all places, but he does what Castro did in his later years, which is just he just keeps talking. He just it's he filibusters. And everybody's a little tired of it. It's an old act. I think it did get. I'm not. I was going to use a very unfortunate choice of words that thankfully my brain said don't. I was going to say his campaign got a shot in the arm, but
hey,
hi-oh. But again, I don't want to make light.
No.
I am incredibly grateful that he was not.
It would have been a nightmare.
Harmed. It would have been horrifying and disastrous.
Yeah.
And
you do know that a shot in the arm is not an actual gunshot.
Yes, you're right. I do. I am aware of the place where that came from. But
yes, now we all have to be careful.
Yes, and political violence is horrifying, and
absolutely,
and again, would have been the worst possible scenario. And so thank God. But at any rate, that he survived that, and that that gave impetus to his campaign, because a lot of his people are very religious.
Yep.
A lot of his supporters are very religious and believe that was a message from God in some respect. Although I have to say, to me, if somebody's going to swing a bullet past his ear and kill a volunteer firefighter right behind him, that doesn't pass the sniff test to me. But okay. At any rate, I believe right now she's actually in a much better position than he is. That Kamala Harris's campaign is much better run, and she has momentum and optimism, which I do believe most Americans like. And Trumpism is a little old, it has.
And yet we've talked about him talked about him this whole thing and barely mentioned the candidate that we all agree is a by far better.
Yeah. Well, he sucks up the oxygen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think you're right. I think, Kamala Harris's campaign obviously is going to benefit those. If there's any undecided votes to get, I would think it'd be divided amongst gender. And I feel that women largely, and those who are interested in the rights of women, which should be more than just women, will likely lean towards Kamala Harris. But I used to always think that, undecided voters are just the privileged. I always think it's to not care about politics requires a really big sense of privilege of like, listen, this doesn't matter to me. Like, whoever, it doesn't matter. I'll be fine. Taxes go up a little bit. I'll complain. Maybe I won't pay them. I don't know. We'll see. It's fine. Don't worry. I can always get, and whereas now I feel like there are some undecided voters in that crowd who are, it's not a position of privilege. It's people who are going to be directly at risk, who are like, well, maybe I think this is a better guy. And I don't get it whatsoever. And I think that it's all too easy for us to kind of sleepwalk towards a very terrible, terrible situation, not just for the U.S., but for everybody else, and like your neighbors. We wouldn't be very happy about it.
Part of the tactics of fascist strongman that has been observed in nations all over the world is the deluge of partisanship is meant to make everybody apathetic. It is to create apathy. And also constantly disparaging institutions so that their power means nothing. I kept trying to point out to people, I was like, you realize Donald Trump complains about so many groups of Americans. There's almost no Americans he actually likes, and so why does he keep saying how much he loves America? Why is he hugging an American flag? He doesn't like America. He doesn't like people who live in cities. That's the most people in America. He doesn't like anybody in the judicial system. He doesn't like, except he likes cops, but only when they're murdering people. I remember when he spoke approvingly of the U.S. Marshals shooting Michael Reinl. That's extrajudicial murder is he's okay with. And he has talked about using the military against Americans and the enemy within, who he's said are Democrats. He's Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. But he hates the judiciary. He hates journalists. He hates people in cities. He hates Democrats. So this is the vast majority of America.
Yeah.
So I don't, and his undermining of institutions. That's as I mentioned. That is what it does is he's effectively undercut anybody who could ever hold him accountable. If you ask Trump supporters, hey, is there anybody you would take bad information about Donald Trump from that you would actually believe it? Is there anybody? And when they think about it, there's nobody. Crazy. Even members of his family have. It does not matter. And I said, okay, that's a cult of personality. That is when when there is one arbiter of truth, and it's him.
Sorry, go ahead, Sandy.
No, go. You go ahead.
I was going to segue us smoothly until you jumped all over my line.
Sorry. I'll try. Go and be smooth. Be smooth, Stuart.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Here's Stuart being smooth.
Well, now I can't be smooth now. It's going to be all herky-jerky now. Throughout history, Sandy, there has been many examples of cult of personality. And we're going to segue slightly over to the fact that, Jon, you have produced a podcast series called The Man Who Calculated Death, which comes out in November. Maybe we should just play the trailer and then talk about it. Can we play the trailer, Owen?
Love it.
I just want you to come home, Mom.
This is a story that begins with a dying wish.
One thing I would like you to do.
My mother's last request that my sister and I finish writing the memoir she'd started about her German childhood, when her city burned and her father designed a secret superweapon for Adolf Hitler.
Deutschland, Sieg Heil!
My grandfather, a man named Robert Lusser, headed the Nazi project to build the world's first cruise missile, which terrorized millions, ripped his family apart, and left a legacy that dogged my mother like a curse.
I think Mom often felt like she suffered, that's what she deserved. Because her dad was a Nazi scientist. And see what happened to the family?
My mom always seemed to be haunted by a question that was shrouded in time. Who bombed a remote farmhouse at the end of the war and killed her mother? And why?
She had some secrets. Mom had some secrets.
She did.
All we have to go on is the Dusty family legend that the attack was British revenge for my grandfather's flying bomb.
My experience, even with secret projects, is nothing stays secret forever.
The odyssey to finish the twisted story our mom ran out of time to tell takes us deep inside our own ancestry, to the dark intersection where family history and world history collide.
It was something even a nightmare cannot repeat.
I'm Suzanne Rico. Join my sister and me as we search for the truth behind our grandfather's work, solve the mystery of our grandmother's death, and for the first time, face the ghosts of our past.
Jeez, who is he?
Listen to The Man Who Calculated Death exclusively with Wondery Plus. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
That sounds pretty good. So,
wow.
That sounds amazing.
Wow, that's amazing.
How did you get involved in this podcast? Like, how did
it was
that
the
come to be?
Craziest thing. My friend Suzanne is an old friend of my wife's. My wife's.
I was going to say.
I only have
wow.
one.
That's nice you kept them all together.
The one. She was throwing a lovely birthday dinner for me, and she always knew that I was a fan of the space program and knew a lot about it. And and at one point she said, actually, my grandfather worked on the space program for a while, and I was like, what? And she said, yeah, before that he worked for Hitler. But anyway, yada yada yada. And it was just an offhand joke she made, and I said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to back up on that. And it turns out that when her mother was literally on her deathbed, she admitted that she had started writing a memoir about growing up in Nazi Germany and her father's work for Hitler, but she wouldn't be able to finish it because she was dying. And so she asked Suzanne to finish it. And Suzanne, who had known something about her grandfather, had known that he was German, that he had been smuggled over to the United States in Operation Paperclip. But she knew some of that. But the family was understandably reticent to look into their Nazi past. So she said, she and her sister Stephanie said, you know what, let's go back to Germany and figure this out. And what they came to understand was that their mother had what they had always sort of written off as their mother's eccentricities was actually post-traumatic stress, because she had survived a bombing that killed her mother. It was always yeah, it was very mysterious.
How old was she when the bombing happened?
I believe she was 8 when the bombing happened, and she still had dim memories of it. And there's a riveting account in the memoir. But the crazy thing was, Suzanne and Stephanie, through their investigation, eventually found out who did it and why. And it's a remarkable examination of a normal family as fascism rises in their country, and how they end up becoming complicit in something that they weren't particularly ideological or any of that stuff. It's about how ordinary people get swept up, and about surviving World War II, which for Germans was very, very harrowing. But she's done the first season, which is them surviving the war, and the second, she's planning a second season about when the family gets transplanted to the United States. What
is Operation Paperclip?
Oh, Operation Paperclip. Oh, I get to tell you about this, Sandy. It's very exciting. Operation Paperclip was a secret U.S. program to smuggle German scientists to the West.
Oh, this is, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
this is what it is.
Because at the end of World War II, as I'm sure you know, the Russians took over one half of Germany and the United States took over the other half of Germany. But there was this battle over who would get the incredible intellectual property of Germany, because they had Werner von Braun, who had invented modern rocketry. And they had this guy, Robert Lesser, who was a plane designer, but had also.
Did some of them end up at Caltech? Is that where?
They absolutely did.
Because of NASA, a lot of NASA comes out of Pasadena and Caltech and that whole area, right?
The crazy thing was, her family got smuggled into the United States because it was illegal to bring Nazis into the United States. But they got smuggled into the United States, which is a fascinating story, and then plopped into the middle of Alabama, to Huntsville, Alabama. So there was this crazy culture clash between, they had a place called Crowd Hill. Yes, exactly. But and it was this was them in America during the rise of the civil rights movement in the United States. So it was really a just an incredible epic, because this family was there for arguably the lowest moment in human history. Certainly of the 20th century. And then being part of what many argue was the greatest accomplishment of the 20th century, which was the moon landing. That their family was a part of both of those is an astounding story. And
what's the name of it again?
It's called The Man Who Calculated Death, and it's on Wondery Plus, which is worthwhile for this subscription just for all the other stuff as well. They do a lot of great podcasts.
It certainly seems like something people should listen to now, just to that emphasize that idea and underline the idea that politics might not seem like it's necessarily going to impact you directly, but it does. It's your world. It impacts the world around you, and that by just reality affects you as well. I'm fascinated by that, and I'm fascinated by the story of just how from especially World War II, very much a good guy, bad guy setup. I always think whenever I see like the in Virginia, the guys marching with the Nazi flags and stuff, and I'm like, did none of you guys see Raiders of the Lost Ark? Did none of you guys did none of you guys see that? Doesn't end well for you guys. But this idea where I also counter that with, I spent time in Austria in the early 90s. And I remember looking at their war memorials, and it's a bunch of young dudes who look like Hitler, trying their best to look like Hitler. And it's like, these guys didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know anything. These weren't like evil monsters. They were just kids who were just sent to be killed. So it's fascinating to sort of be reminded that your choices and who you vote for and who's in office and all that stuff is incredibly important.
And that we literally remember that era in black and white because that was most of the newsreels we get. But there was real shades of gray, and there were what was attractive about the rise of Hitler. You're when you're in the position of understanding why people loved that idea at the time. You go, oh, okay, I get it. I mean, he got a lot of ideas from America. Eugenics was very popular in the United States. We had all kinds of laws about how we treated Native Americans, and he literally would borrow chunks of the language from those laws to try to segregate the Jews. We think, if I was in that time, I would be a brave person standing up and saying, "I'll put the Jews in my attic."
I remember staying in the.
I used to feel that way till I had kids.
Yeah, like, I won't even put the kids in my attic.
I remember
staying.
When I was in Austria, I stayed in a small village of 2,000 people in this old cottage that belonged to a family of friends and his aunt Ida, Tante Ida, and it was where the U.S. soldiers had stayed after the war and all that kind of stuff. It was in the foothills of the Alps. It was a phenomenal place. Lovely. Everyone was super sweet and very nice. But I remember talking to Tante Ida, and she was saying, she'd been part of the SS youth, and she's like, but we had no idea what was going on at all. I mean, there's less excuses now, but I mean, certainly that idea that she had no idea what was going on. She goes, all we know is that in this village of at the time 1,000 people, this guy named Hitler showed up and said, I'm going to build a road to the next biggest town, and I'm going to put a mill up on that hill. And she said, within a year, both of those things were done. And it was like, well, this is obviously our guy. This is, and there's just such again, it underlines that responsibility people have as voters to be like, know who you're voting for. A really good example of not doing that is there was elections in British Columbia recently, and some people exiting the polls were like, well, who'd you vote for? I voted for Conservatives because I'm sick of Justin Trudeau. It's like, nope, that's not the wrong. That's the wrong election.
Wrong election. It's not a federal election. They thought they were voting in a different election, that's the whole thing that those of us who are like commenting on this stuff, we have no idea that the almost dead illiteracy of a very significant part of the electorate.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And again, I wish that it wasn't so important. I wish they could that playing their games and having a great time and reading a great book, that's what that they could spend their time doing that. I wish that was life, I think the stakes are much higher now than usual.
We're going to finish off with something fun. This is our Real Talk section, spelled REEL, like, Instagram Reels, because it's cool.
The young people.
Exactly. We're going to play a quick little game of this or that. You guys can give me your responses. It doesn't matter who says the response first. This or that. You travel back in time and tell people not to watch The Apprentice because of what Trump becomes, or tell everyone to watch it so the ratings are so good he never gives it up.
Not to watch. Not to watch. Because all these things run their course eventually.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
it would have. There's a point at which the public would have gotten tired of it, and then they would have.
It would have moved on anyway. Yeah, I got it.
I'd say watch it if they would film it in his real boardroom.
Yes, there you go. Little verite action on the.
This one's a bit more
with smell-o-vision.
It's with smell-o-vision. Well, this next question relates to that. This is another this or that, and two a little bit sort of. You have to think a little harder on these ones. Would you rather sit behind Trump in economy class on a 5-hour flight, or sit in front of Trump in economy class on a 5-hour flight?
I'm going to go behind.
Brave.
I know.
You don't think he's good? He's a seat
move,
recliner.
John.
He's the kind of guy who immediately gets in there as soon as the light
I'm
goes.
sure he's a seat recliner. I can handle that. What I can't handle is the nonstop yammer. And I imagine the yammer would be at least forward-facing
Projected
by and large.
forward.
John. You're forgetting. It's a 5-hour flight, and has he changed his,
I don't
pull-ups?
know. It's I hesitate to
Don't make him. Don't paint John into a corner like that.
on his medical issues.
It's that shit show, John.
Remember, he's in America. He's behind enemy lines. So you have to be very careful, very mindful of what he's saying. Well, that was good. Well, thank you very much for watching and or listening to Canada Watching U.S. News. Of course, you can find us at CanadaWatchingUSNews.com, where you can subscribe with your email address. You'll get an email notification every time there's a new episode. And you can also find us on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you so much to our special guest, Jon Cryer, who was way smarter than I thought he was going to be honest.
That's great. I'm taking that as a compliment.
It was wonderful. Thank
Obviously,
you so much.
you didn't do your homework, Stuart.
I know. I was
great.
like, I don't know. He's
John, you're
funny and
great.
nice, I guess.
Thank you,
That's
Sam.
good
What a
enough.
treat. What a treat.
That was
Thanks so
really
much,
a pleasure, you guys. Thank you
Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I can sneak you some MP3s ahead of
I
time
love it.
if you like.
I love it. Fantastic.
But no, subscribe to Wondery Plus. That's the most important thing. It's
Before you do that, subscribe to
to Wondery Plus.
CanadaWatchingUSNews.com. Then go to Wondery
Yes.
Plus. Then you can do that. You can do both at the same time. Take you seconds. Anyway, thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
The audio version of Canada Watching U.S. News was produced, engineered, and edited by Owen Reynolds. The video version of the podcast was edited by Lisa Cumming. Our theme music is by Owen Reynolds. You can find past episodes and more at CanadaWatchingUSNews.com or your favorite podcast platform.